5 short trips into towns, houses, cars, and lives where something stayed. These are true encounters, simple lives broken by something that would not leave. Welcome to the Black Hour Stories. This is 5 true spirit encounters, just as promised. Each one short, each one real enough that the people who lived them still check the back seat and sleep with a light on. Listen close. One detail in each story repeats later. You'll want to note it. The first story takes place on a road that looked like any other at dusk, a strip of 2 lanes between corn and dark phone lines. A woman named Mara was driving home from a late shift. The heater pushed warm, stale air across her hands. A radio riff played low. She'd been alone in the car for the whole week, which felt normal now, like a wrapper she could slip off and toss. That night the headlights picked up a figure on the shoulder, small and still, and for a long moment she thought it was a kid with a bike. She slowed, the engine a soft animal, and the figure raised an arm. It was too late to stop. She pulled over. The air smelled like rain under sun, that wet, metallic skin scent right before a storm. The figure stepped into the light. It wore clothes older than anything in town, dull and smelling faintly of cedar. Empty eyes met her. The eyes were not empty of thought, they were empty of time. They had no place to sit in her memory, like a name that had been washed out. Mara's throat closed. She heard the radio drop a notch, as if the song had been forced to lean away. The figure walked with no shuffle, no scrape. It passed the car but did not move around it. It kept a straight line along the shoulder as if the world had shifted and left a narrow groove for it to travel. Mara watched it move, heartbeat bright enough to taste. When she started the car and eased forward, the figure slowed, then stopped on the same patch of gravel and simply waited. Her mirror catching its silhouette made something cold uncoil in her chest. A small, hard thought pushed through. It wanted inside. She drove slowly, increasing speed in tiny steps. The road swallowed the figure, but only for a moment. In the rearview mirror, it reappeared where it had been, standing on the shoulder as if no time had passed. Each time Mara blinked, it was closer. She turned down a side street she never used, tires whispering on wet tar. In the house, a lamp was left on, the living room smelling of coffee and the newspaper through windows. She slammed the door and locked it, the click loud as a verdict. In the kitchen, she leaned against the counter and tried to laugh. She felt watched, the air in the room stamped with the pattern of an eye. That night, around 3 a.m, she woke to the sound of the front door opening. The lamp she had left on was still on, but the light seemed thinner, like someone had taken a sheet and draped it over the bulb. She did not call out. She moved without thinking, a muscle memory for disaster. In the hallway, the shape stood so still her own breath sounded loud. The figure's face was closer than it could have been in the street. There was a smear of something dark on its sleeve, like soot. Mara found that she could not hold on to names of her childhood town, names of the park bench where she'd first kissed a boy. The figure tilted its head, as if listening to something only it could hear. The rule the figure obeyed, and the rule is the thing that mattered later for everyone else who would meet it, was this: it could not cross a threshold without an invitation in a small way. Mara did not notice she had left a window unlatched in the kitchen. The figure paused at the sill but did not stop. When it moved through, she felt a chill that was not air but intention. The next morning, every lock in the house had a thin black smudge along its edge, as if some invisible hand had rubbed charcoal across the metal. She sold the house 6 months later and moved to an apartment that did not have a yard. Even there, late at night, she checked the back seat of her car. The second story happened in a hospital room that smelled of lemon cleaner and old sleep. A nurse named Theo worked nights. He liked the quiet of the wards after midnight, when visitors were fewer and the machines were human again. Steady, mechanical breath. One night an old man was admitted who would not give his name. He said only that he had been on the road and felt tired. He had no relatives listed, and his pockets were full of coins. He slept like someone who had finally been given permission. Theo noticed odd things about the old man's room. A cup that kept moving from the bedside to the windowsill, each time wet inside, though no one had poured water. The TV would turn on at the exact minute Theo finished cleaning the next room. At 2 in the morning, the old man would wake and sit at the edge of the bed and stare at the window as if listening. Theo started leaving the small lamp on because the darkness made the shape in the corner more solid. The shape was never fully visible. It was like the memory of a chair just vacated. 3 nights in, the old man stopped breathing for several seconds, and then started again with a cough that sounded like a door closing. Theo pulled his watch out, the second hand fast and small, and counted. The old man did not open his eyes. When they called the doctor, the old man had a thin, neat bruise along his collarbone, a mark as if someone had gripped for balance. Later that night, when Theo stepped back into the hall, the smell of lemon cleaner had changed. It had an undernote of winter cellar and rot. A clipboard had been moved from the nurse's station to the shelf beneath a radiator, as if someone had set it down and then forgotten. The repeating detail is the same pattern as the first story. Places that are passed by and then reappear, like mirrors that retain an impression. The old man began to talk in his sleep, saying the same place name over and over, a motel with a fading neon sign. Theo followed the sound like a moth, imagining first the neon, then the stains in a bathtub. He made a call to find the old man's past and learned that the motel had burned years earlier. The rooms had wooden trim and a carpet that held stains like fossils. When he went back to check on the patient, the old man had the smell of smoke threaded through his hair. Theo began to keep a pencil at hand and found himself drawing tiny doors on the margins of his paperwork, circling them until the ink bled. On the 4th night, the old man opened his eyes and whispered a name that Theo knew belonged to no living person in the hospital's records. It was small and flat, like a stone. The old man smiled with the honesty of someone who has been handed back a toy. After that, he slipped away in the morning without waking. On Theo's clipboard that day a small wet coin lay atop the charts. It was unmarked cool and had a smell like cedar and rain. Theo found he could not throw it away. The 3rd story happened to a couple who bought a house cheap at the end of a cul-de-sac because the backyard met a stand of birch trees and the price was irresistible. They were new to town, the kind of people who thought they could fix a house with paint in a weekend. The house had a cellar with a stone floor and a low ceiling. The first night they were in, the dog refused to go down the steps. It would stand at the top, tail low, ears flat, watching, and then turn away to nap instead of investigating. The couple laughed at the nervous animal, but they felt the same pinch, a tightness across the back of the neck that did not match fear exactly, more like a memory of being watched. They found a sealed bedroom in the back of the cellar with a door nailed shut from the inside, paned glass clouded with old lime. The nails had been fresh at some point. New screws had been forced over top of them, like a second thought. When they pried the door open, the air that fled was cold and smelled of iron and clean cloth. Inside were a child's toys, folded in place, a small wooden train with faded paint, a doll whose dress had been folded in a way that suggested neat hands. The toys were layered with dust but lay as if someone had just walked away. They left the toys. At night, scratches appeared along the ceiling beams above the bed upstairs, shallow arcs where fingernails had dragged in a pattern. The couple would wake with the sense that someone had been sitting on the footboard, legs crossed, watching. The recurring detail returns. Objects that are moved or set down and then appear elsewhere later. The train would show up in the kitchen drawer, the doll on the back step, as if the house was replaying the child's last week in short loops. Once, the husband woke to find the train running on the windowsill with no wind to push it, its little wheels turning with deliberate slowness. They installed a motion sensor in the cellar and tied it to a light on the porch. The sensor would not trigger at night, but during the day it cut on twice, and then the light hummed and went dark. In the morning, there would be a child's small footprint pressed in the mud at the edge of the yard. The prints were precise like a stamp and too small for either of them. They tried to leave the toys in a box in the attic, sealed the door again, nailed the wood. But the next morning, a single toy sat on the kitchen table. It was placed in the center, as if for an offering. The pattern had become clearer. The house followed a rule. If an object was taken out and left elsewhere, it asked for something in return. Small, simple things at first. A bit of bread on the windowsill, a light left on until dawn. Those payments kept the footsteps from getting louder. One night the husband woke to his wife's whispering voice, though her mouth was closed. He went to the cellar to find her sitting at the foot of the sealed room, hands out as if balancing something fragile. The doll had opened its eyes. Not eyes that blinked, but a small dark hollow, as if someone had gone too deep when carving. The couple moved out that week. They left every light on. The fourth story took place in a library that smelled like glue and old paper and a little lemon. The head librarian, June, had worked there so long the steps in the floor knew her weight. One winter the town acquired a donation, a heavy leather-bound ledger stitched with twine and tucked inside thick tissue. It was a book of names and addresses from a century ago, and June set it on a high shelf that made people crane. That night, while she was locking up, June heard the ledger fall into the return slot, though the book had been placed higher than the slot's reach. It landed with a thud that made the lamp tremble. She took the ledger to her desk. The handwriting inside was old school, the loops large and confident, and every name had a small tally next to it. June's thumb ran over the paper and came away smelling faintly of smoke. When she set the ledger back on the shelf, a folded scrap of paper slid out and fluttered to the floor. It read, in a child's careful hand, "Leave a light." The phrase stuck to June like lint. She started leaving the reading room light on when she locked up. The ledgers thudded on the floor again, always after she'd left for the night. People began to tell her small things. A shift in the stack where a book had been. A bookmark appearing in a book that had nothing to do with the reader who found it. A regular complained that every time she picked up a certain biography, she smelled spice and anise, a smell she connected to the house she grew up in. June found herself checking behind shelves, peering into reading nooks as if a small child might be there with a torch. She found where the ledger's loops matched other marks around town. A shopkeeper with a faded scar over his brow, an alley with 3 stones that did not belong. Then someone left a note taped to the library door in the morning. "Do not close the curtains." It was not in anyone's handwriting. That night the sky was clear, but the curtains remained open because June had read the note and felt that small rule click into place. When dawn came, the curtains were closed from the outside. The library smelled like rain, and the ledger was open on the front desk at a page filled with names she did not recognize. The pattern had shifted. The thing in the ledger was leaving marks that reached beyond the building, names placed into the world. June started to write in the margin of that ledger with a pencil. She wrote a short line, "Leave the light on." On the next night, she found that beside her pencil lay a small coin the same shape as the hospital coin, cool and smelling of cedar. She kept it in her pocket. The coin would come to be the common thing linking all 5 encounters. Cool to the touch, the smell of cedar and rain, and an odd resistance to being thrown away. The 5th story happened to a man named Carlos who owned a diner where the coffee tasted like burned sugar and the booths had the smooth shine of 100 elbows. He worked the late shift alone because he liked the way the fluorescent lights turned the coffee into something honest and cheap. One winter a woman came in at 3 in the morning and sat in the corner, wrapped in a shawl that smelled faintly of cedar. Her cup steamed though she had not sipped it. She asked for nothing, just sat, watching the sugar spill like a small tide when he swept the floor. Carlos felt a tug at the edges of thought, as if someone had reached inside a drawer in his head and shuffled his memories. After she left, customers who had been regulars for years started to tell him the same small thing. that they had seen a woman in the booth earlier in the week and that the woman had asked them for directions to a place that did not exist anymore. A pool hall with a blocked doorway, a bridge that had been torn down. They all described the same purse she had carried, threadbare and smelling of cedar. Carlos started keeping a ledger of his own to write down the times she appeared. He noticed that each time she was in the diner, the coffee pot would stop mid-brew, the steam frozen like a curtain. He chalked it up to a cold. One night he found himself cleaning plates after closing and heard the bell above the door. The woman stood there and then stepped inside, but as she crossed the threshold, the bell's ring was a low, hollow sound like someone reading from a book the wrong way around. She walked to the counter and left, in the space where change was exchanged, a small coin. When Carlos picked it up, it was the same shape as the other coins. The metal was cool and had that cedar and rain smell. He kept the coin in a drawer beneath the register. As the weeks passed, the woman started to appear more often. People who had been long gone came back and sat in the booths. A man who had not paid his tab in months left the bill and no explanation. A young couple who had split up years before sat in a corner and did not speak, only stared toward the door. The woman never spoke to anyone. Once someone tried to hand her a napkin, and she accepted it with hands that were too thin, leaving a line of print on the paper like someone had pressed a coin into wet clay. Carlos found that the diner had its own rule. Things left on the counter stayed longer than they should. A plate a customer had forgotten would be gone the next morning, though the owner swore she had taken it. When he checked the drawer beneath the register, every coin had a tiny notch worn in its edge, like a thumbprint in metal. The pattern was everywhere now: coins, ancient books, ledgers, toys. Each time something was left, something returned. The returns asked for small things in trade. A light kept on, a chair left empty, a song left playing until the record's needle found the end. On a cold night, Carlos finally confronted the woman as she sat in the booth. He set his palms on the table and asked a question he had not believed would help. "Why are you here?" The woman did not look at him for a long time. When she did, her eyes were empty but carrying a depth like an old well. She lifted a finger and tapped the rim of the coffee cup, leaving a faint print that smudged like pencil soot. The coin on the table beside his hand warmed for a second, and then returned to cold. He understood then the rule in its whole cruel geometry. These things were not asking to be kept. They were asking to be remembered in a certain way. They wanted to be acknowledged, not fixed with a shovel or ignored. The last paragraphs, not the threads. All 5 encounters shared small fingerprints. A coin, the smell of cedar and rain, things left that came back, and a rule that ran like a seam: small returns for small offerings. People who met these spirits found that a way to calm them was not to fight, but to obey the small, strange economy. Leave the light on. Leave a piece of bread on the windowsill. Put a coin in the margin of a ledger. It is not a bargain in the way humans make bargains. It is a pattern, a set of gestures carved into places by something older than memory. Those gestures ease the presence, make it fold into a corner where it will not reach as far. They do not erase the fact that something has touched the life. They only make the touch less hungry. Every person who encountered the spirits collected a coin and kept it in a drawer. They kept it for no sensible reason, the way people keep the last receipt from a trip they cannot explain. The coins never rusted, never caught the eye of a metal detector, and when someone tried to throw one away the next day, it would be back on their pillow the morning after with a thin smear of ash across the edge. There is one last thing to say. Each of these spirits had one rule they could not break. They could not cross an entry willingly without a small opening left by a living person. They followed where people had left a door ajar, a window unlatched, a lamp glowing. That small kindness or small forgetfulness is all they ever needed to pass from the margin into the middle. Once they were inside, they were patient. The patience was older than any of the towns, older than the houses. It settled in like dust. If you ever meet something like this, The people who lived through it had one piece of advice that was also the scariest. Do not pretend you did not see it. Pretend to see it fully. Notice it. Name the smallest thing it touches. Leave it a coin or a light or a scrap. The gesture may not fix anything, but it will give the thing a place to stand where it is not hungry. The final picture is small. A drawer with a dozen cool coins and a lamp left on through the night. One of the coins rolls when the light breathes, a tiny echo of something that once asked to be remembered. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. If one of these stories hit close, like and subscribe to the Black Hour Stories for more After Dark accounts. And keep some light on where you sleep tonight, just in case they followed home.